Have you ever caught yourself mid-conversation with your partner using all the right communication tools and still feeling worlds apart? If so, this episode will feel both like a revelation and a homecoming. Today, I'm honored to welcome someone whose voice feels like a compass in a world that often confuses performance with presence. Dr. Randall Alifano is not only a clinical psychologist with a PhD and 40 years of therapeutic experience, but he's also an ordained minister who has dedicated his life to weaving together the threads of psychology and spirituality. Through decades of intimate work with individuals and couples, he has become a master of listening and of helping others drop into what he beautifully calls listening in the raw. Also the title of his amazing book. Hi there. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Markella Kaplani, a psychologist, a parenthood and relationship coach, and a parent myself. Together, we explore the transformative journey of parenthood and its profound impact on our relationship with ourselves, our partners, and our children, so that we can be present and show up as we envision without having to do more. Let's get into today's episode. Here are a few things that I want you to listen in for and watch out for during this conversation that I believe are pivotal and are going to be super helpful. For one, we talk about why the tools that we learn about in communication can sometimes backfire and how our partner senses when we're performing empathy rather than truly feeling it. We also talk about how filters that we carry from childhood shape every argument and misunderstanding in adulthood, and how recognizing them can almost melt the emotional distance. Then we go into how our bodies, through tension, contraction, or softening, are often more honest than our thoughts, and how our somatic awareness can guide us back to connection. Another interesting concept that we discuss is the difference between reacting from a filter and responding with innocence, especially in those high-stakes moments as parents or as partners. We also go into what it truly takes to repair a rupture, both with our kids as well as with our spouse or with our partner and with ourselves. And finally, something that I absolutely loved, and it strengthened my admiration of Randall and the connection that we both felt, was when discussing about the popular idea of do your own work, which isn't always enough, and how true intimacy is built through interdependence, not self-sufficiency. Sometimes, even psychology can have it wrong. Sometimes the things that we hear or we read in self-development books and podcasts could be misinterpreted or taken to an extreme that leads to just as many and quite similar problems. This episode is a masterclass in vulnerability, deep presence, and mutual healing. It is for anyone who has ever felt unheard or has struggled to hear the ones they love most. So whether you're listening as a parent, a partner, a therapist, or simply a human who craves more genuine connection, I invite you to press play with an open heart. Let's dive in. Hello, Randall. Welcome to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast.
Hey, Ricardo. Good to meet you again.
It's nice to meet you as well. It's the second time that we meet, but now it's the first time that we meet after I have read a big portion of your book, which I absolutely love so far. And I'm very glad that you're here so that listeners can pick up from the things that I was able to read so that we can discuss them. And hopefully they get to read your wisdom as well. So let's get into the conversation. First, by hearing you talk a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do, and about your book and what led you to write it.
That's a big question. I'm a therapist. I've been practicing for over 40 years, and I'm absolutely in love with the work. While a lot of my colleagues are aching for retirement, it feels like a foreign entity to me. Why would I want to retire? I so love having these intimate contacts with other humans. It's great. How I got started, as you probably read in the book, was even as a young kid around my big family, I heard a lot of people talking and not very many people listening. So it seemed like nobody was really showing up for the other. People were just had this kind of internal pressure to say what they wanted to say. And they were strong on speaking and very weak on listening. And I remember clearly feeling alone in that big family system because I could see nobody either knew how to listen or wanted to. And as I grew up, I really wanted to hear what was going on for folks. And what I learned was it was the listening that made me feel less alone, not the speaking. When I could listen to someone so they would really drop in and tell me intimate, tender, vulnerable details, suddenly we were intimately connected. The separation between self and other seemed to disappear, and we were family. So that's in high school. And so then becoming a therapist just seemed natural to me. So I went to school and became a therapist.
Wow. And so the book, my understanding is that it's very recent that it came out, right?
Yeah, 2 years this month.
Congratulations. You have a lot of wisdom in the book, and it focuses on listening. It's called Listening in the Raw.
Yes.
And I like the fact that although you're a therapist, you talk about the traps that therapists can fall into in terms of listening. And so in terms of this podcast, because we have a lot of parents listening, we have a lot of couples listening who are struggling in their communication and in their connection.
Yes.
And they have been hearing, both through here and through other mediums, of certain techniques that they can use in order to be able to get closer to each other. And you make an amazing point in your book, which is that sometimes using these tools can actually lead us to be further apart. Our listener, the person that we have across from us that we want to connect with more, can pick up on the fact that we're using a tool, but we're not really emotionally connected. And therefore, instead of bringing us closer, even though we have great intentions and we're using the tools and we've put work into this, what we're doing is we're creating more distance. So I would like for you to break that down for us a little bit. And then we can go into talking about what it is that we can do as the average person who wants to get closer to our partner, to our kids. If these tools can be a trap, what can we do instead?
That's a really good question and well put. I think the great irony is as therapists, we're taught to listen. Unfortunately, mostly we're taught to listen through techniques so that the speaker might feel a certain something. And that's fine. Techniques are fine. But when we tend to over-rely on them a lot, when we over-rely on them, they become technique-y. They don't become an open door so that the speaker feels more free to say what they want to say and drop in deeper into vulnerability. They can feel that the therapist is applying a technique. Even if they don't think it in their mind, they can feel the distance. And I've tested this innumerable times in my own practice, with my own children, with my own partner. People know it even if they don't register it in language in their mind. They can feel the distance. And they really feel the difference when someone's asking questions with real curiosity because they really want to know what it's like underneath the narrative. They pick that up also. Something my lady and I speak about a lot is how new clients will come in and they'll say, I've been in therapy for 20 years. No one's ever asked me these questions. And our head spins around like an owl. What? Wait, what? 20 years and they never asked you about what you're speaking about to deepen the conversation? Yes, unfortunately, that's right. And partly it's because therapists are taught to assess, diagnose, and then treat the diagnosis. So we then have a filter that if I label you as depressed, then I have to treat that depression. And now my perception is quite limited because my job is to fix you. And then I miss everything else that you may be saying because the filters don't allow for the full expansion of listening.
You break down filters a lot in the book. And I do want to ask, what are the kinds of filters that we have with our partner when it comes to feeling disconnected, when it comes to feeling resentful, when we've come to the point where we feel like there's a distance and I feel very misunderstood, and then they say they feel very misunderstood and I don't understand why because I am making an effort from my point of view, right? In reading your book, I realized that both partners have filters. I use lenses that I see you through my lenses, and you used it at some point in your book too. So, what is it that you find most couples run into as filters that don't allow them to see the full version of their partner and therefore communicate more deeply?
That's a really good and very deep question. I could talk about that for 6 hours, I think. I'm not a big fan of Freud, but some of the things he said I thought was brilliant, and one of them is transference. So I think even when we're just talking with our partners, we have to hold that from birth until however old we are now, we already have all these filters in place. So, for example, I might err more towards anger, and my partner errs more towards anxiety. So when we first got together, if I had even a twinge of anger in me, she would be reactive, like, why are you so angry? And I think, I'm not that angry. And same with me with her, with anxiety. And then we realized it's because we come from such different backgrounds. Anxiety means something to her, and it means something quite different to me. So we mutually were unable to hear what was underneath the anger or the anxiety because we'd get reactive to it. Why are you doing that? I don't get it. Until she could hear why I would move towards anger, and I could hear why she would move more towards anxiety. So now, for example, if she gets anxious, I just drop in. It's like, oh, I know that there's fear in there. She's looking for a contact that's not happening right now. I want the same thing. Filters are gone. And I can just ask questions, be curious, and genuinely be curious about, I want to know what just happened. Tell me. So even if she says, well, you did X and Y, instead of me going, I did not, I can just, oh, and so when I did X and Y, it hit that raw nerve. Right, got you. And now we're together again. Does that fit?
So, connection.
That's what I'm looking for.
And how do I understand the anxiety? So, for example, you're saying you have an inclination toward anger, but there is some meaning that you also gave to anxiety, right? And so her getting anxious meant something to you until you were able to listen to what it meant to her.
Exactly.
If it's okay for me to ask, what is it that the anxiety meant to you before you understood what it was about your wife?
See, this is important. This is why one gets to recognize when a filter is working as opposed to our true self. Because I'll have a certain attitude in my mind. I'll be thinking thoughts about her and what she's doing right now that are judgmental as opposed to curious. So initially I might think, why are you doing that? That's silly. That's a waste of time. What are you doing? And I could feel the quality of those statements. And then I know, oh, I'm lost. I'm in a filter. I'm not curious. I'm like, what are you doing? My whole body will contract. If I pay attention, there's a tension in me with what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Or whatever. When I drop into, shake my head and get into curiosity, my whole body softens. I'm receptive suddenly. When muscles are tight, we're not very receptive. We're not very mobile. When there's a whole somatic softening, things can enter us that a moment ago couldn't have because we were tight.
You mentioned that these filters are there as protective mechanisms. So they get activated in order to protect us. And it's something that I talk a lot about in the podcast. So then, because they're quite automatic and they've been there, like you're saying, for a long time, potentially since childhood, the technique that you're offering to kind of see whether I'm being judgmental or if I am not contracting, if I am feeling calmer in my body, can be a good indication.
Yes.
However, it feels like it's a little bit of a step extra that someone who is very much in the filter will not be able to really realize this until after they have reacted in a way that doesn't promote connection. Is there something that I can do if I feel very activated and I haven't found my filters yet, so that I can more quickly become aware of what is happening and get to that state that you just mentioned?
Again, I think that's a really good question. I think the delicacy of it is it's very individual. What you may need to get in touch with might be very different than what I need to get in touch with because our filters may be very different. Generally speaking, what I do is I anchor in my body. The body speaks its mind. So if I'm up here judging or whatever I'm doing, and I'm not feeling, am I breathing into my diaphragm? Are my legs relaxed? And, if I can feel a tension in me, then that's the hint. Even if I think I'm right, which is a big setup, I can feel there's a contraction. So a filter is in place. I have to self-reflect on why am I tight? Where am I tight? And what does it mean? it almost always means I'm aching for something that's not happening, and I'm losing faith that it's going to happen, that our contact isn't going to work. So, you've probably heard the pursuer, one pursues, one withdraws. That's one of the dynamics with couples a lot, that one person is the pursuer and one person is like, whoa, whoa. Both of those can be seen as filters. So when the person who pursues is pursuing, they can feel they're leaning forward. And the person who withdraws, they're taking this half step back. In terms of a couple, to me, that's the first step to notice if they're in that dynamic is as soon as you feel like, where are you going? And you're leaning in, take a breath, sit back, and speak it directly. Hey, I feel like we're in that dynamic where you maybe feel pressure from me and you're moving away. I just want to have contact with you. Like it resets the whole picture.
It makes it more voluntary for me to approach if I'm the one that was running away. So we do need to get in touch with our bodies, that's for sure. As you were speaking, I was thinking of several couples. I see a parent-child dynamic that happens a lot of times in couples. I'm wondering if that would be the same, but in different words, with the couple that you're describing, the one that runs away and the other one that chases, or if it's different.
I think it could be the same. I think how I would differentiate them is when they split into parent-child dynamics, usually the one who's the parent is pretty assured that they're right and the child is wrong.
Right.
And what they're missing is, it may be that the person who goes to child withdraws is actually they don't feel safe. They don't feel like you're genuinely interested in hearing what's going on with them. How much is that a filter from maybe childhood where the parents genuinely were not interested in listening to them? That needs to be explored. But again, just that filter of, I know I'm right. Why are you distancing? Just that whatever. The self-reflection has to come, I could feel the tension in me. I'm pushing my agenda, and my partner, because we've done it for decades, is drifting away. So how to pause and go, oh, we're in it. We're doing that thing. That's kind of fun. Here we go. How do we come back home?
To observe themselves.
Yes. How do we realign with our true intention of really having contact? Because even the parent who's saying, come on, they're aching for contact. And if we could remember that in the other and in ourselves, filters already relax a certain percentage.
But that's tough.
Yeah.
A lot of times what happens is that we find ourselves in these types of situations and we think, like you said, I'm right. I'm the one who has been wronged. You need to listen to me, right? And it's very hard to really take that step back, observe myself and say, what is it that I need? Maybe I can say, yes, you know what? I need to be listened to. You don't listen to me. I say something, you don't hear me. And we come into the conversation with this resentment and with this anger, this deep sadness, that it makes it very difficult for us to then also see that the other person and the way that they've been reacting is also a way that they are trying to get in touch.
Exactly.
How can I soften myself when I'm in that state, when I feel I have been very wronged, and I really can't see that you are also responding to me, and your behavior that bothers me is also a cry for connection? How can I soften so that I can actually see that and then soften further and we can carry on this conversation?
I think the way to do it is to say to yourself over and over again what you just said, which is, oh, when they do X, I do Y, and we're often running into a same old pattern. What's really true is they're aching for the same thing I'm aching for underneath our narrative, real connection. So, for example, if my lady is upset about something and she says, well, you did that thing, I could easily go to, I did not, or you're misreading, or I can play therapist, or all kinds of filters I can employ. If I just have that split second moment of she's upset, she's leading with what I did or didn't do, but I know there's a whole lot underneath that I don't know about yet. I'm in the unknown. So if I feel that initial reaction of, what do you mean I did such and so? I can feel it in my body, but I've already planted in my brain, that's a filter. I know from experience that if I say, tell me more, wait, I don't understand. What did I do? What was the impact on you? She'll open up, I'll feel her vulnerability, and my reaction of 10 seconds ago, it's gone. The filter, I don't need protection because now I can feel her heart, her real intention, not reactive anymore. So for me, it's don't take the initial bait of the initial filter. It almost always leads us to what we're aching to get out of. And this happens probably for you too, repeatedly as a therapist. Someone might say something and I'm like, what? Notice the reaction, my own filter, and I drop in and I ask more questions. And it was, oh, I wasn't seeing it correctly, which is why a filter kicked in. And also, if I may be redundant, we humans, especially therapy humans, don't like to not know. We feel like we're supposed to know what's going on. And to me, that's one of the most seductive filters. To me, for my body to be open, to have stillness in my mind where I'm not running a narrative, to really settle into that, I have to be okay with the unknown. I have to think of it as a playground. I'm not sure what's going to happen yet, but I really want to know. And so curiosity comes into me instead of, uh-oh, wait, they said this, but what was that about their mom? And what's the transference here? And what's the countertransference? Yeah, all that's important. But first, be still so I can hear what they're trying to say under their narrative, which almost always comes out a little crooked initially.
I really, really like your approach. I was actually discussing with a friend the other day how when we started and she felt the same experience, it was as if we were trying to figure things out, to have a manual, kind of like the DSM, or, you go into it and you start to study some kind of approach and you start to think that the approach that you studied gave you some formulas and now you know what to do. And people who study psychoanalysis, that's the only way and the best way. People who do CBT, that's the only way. And I was saying how grateful I am that I have been able to be in the field long enough so that I can shed all of that. Yes. And to be able to see that no one way will lead me to truly helping. And that intuitively, if you just listen, whatever tools it is that you learned, you are going to use them somehow, some way. But if you don't fall into the trap of trying to figure things out step by step, formula wise, and all these things, you can truly tune in to what it is that you're doing.
Exactly. Well,
so I really, really like the way that you're approaching this. Of course, this can make both therapists and potentially clients as well feel like they're walking into uncharted territory.
Yes.
And so if this is the advice that we are giving, how can we tell couples that you can get better? Is it only through going to therapy, for example, couples counseling, that they can get better? Is there no way that they can use the tools that they've been reading in articles and in books and listening to on podcasts so that they can come closer to each other?
I think therapy can really help, but yeah, of course they could do it on their own, especially if they've done some reading and they really understand what gets in their way of listening. If they could up their listening skills, I think 90% of what couples fight about would be quieter, but it takes commitment.
I talk a lot about the relationship to the self as well. And it sounds like what you're saying is if I can relate to myself better and understand my own filters, then I can up my listening skills and be able to understand you better. Is that right?
Yes. And this is where I feel like psychology and spirituality have to be brought together. Because even when we talk about the self, does anybody really know what we're talking about? The psychoanalyst will think this, the CBT person will think that, the somatic therapist will think the other, this philosopher will think this, a Christian will think that. So I think this is where we come face to face with our biases, because I find, especially when I'm listening, when there's a stillness, when I'm quiet, that's my real self. All the things I was programmed to believe about myself, they're just programs. It's filters. And that's why when I'm listening, I want to be still. That true self, as it were, is really in the room with genuine curiosity and genuinely wanting to know what it's like for you over there. Because I know from 40 years of practice and really listening, as soon as we get to what's really going on over there, I'm not listening in the service of the speaker. It's a mutuality. When they really drop in and I can really feel them, I typically feel the same way. I could imagine if I was raised that way, I would have the same reaction right now. Oh, we're brothers and sister. We're brother and brother. We're sister and sister. We're one family, struggling with different angles, but essentially the same thing, which is I learned I can't be such and so because of how my parents raised me or whatever, and I've had to shut it down. And what people can learn in therapy or by studying themselves is when I can really feel the filters, and what they do to me and what they do to my listening, the differentiation between self and other tends to disappear. I'm not alone anymore. So earlier we were joking about I don't want to retire. This is why, is some of my most intimate, spiritually connected contacts with people is when clients courageously drop into the unknown, into their vulnerability. And I'm not there just to fix them, serve them. I want to be solidly comfortable in the unknown so I can keep on traversing this trail with them until they land in, this is what I'm trying to say. And then again, like I've been saying throughout our talk today, then the differentiation between self and other is hardly there at all. And so it benefits me to really drop in and listen with curiosity.
I'm thinking of the one case that you mentioned in the book of this woman who had been in therapy with several therapists, but she had never shared the abuse that she experienced. And when you asked her how come she never shared it, she told you, if I'm not mistaken, that basically she had sensed that they were not ready to be with her in that pain, that they would not be able to deal with it.
That's a beautiful example of someone who's not telling the therapist, you're not really listening, or I'm afraid to tell you more because I don't think you can handle it. She could just feel it and she would take a step back. So whatever horror she was about to share with them, she cordoned that off. And now she's doing chit chat about her work or her relationship with her child or whatever. And she was shocked when she intimated there was some trauma in her history. And I was like, what? Tell me. And I genuinely wanted to know. And she cocked her head a little bit like, you really want to hear it? Yes, I want to hear every detail. And she could just feel I was telling the truth. And we went into this guy, I think I mentioned in the book, a history that would have shocked Stephen King. It was mind-blowingly shocking, completely beyond anything I'd ever read about, heard about, that parents' friends could treat a child the way she was treated. And the only way I could travel with her is solidly sitting in the unknown. She's going to teach me about a world I have no idea about. And if I run too quickly to conclusions, she'll take a half step back and I will have lost the opportunity to really get to know her.
And so the job of a therapist, but also of a partner, is not to know. And maybe partly the reason why we are scared to connect with our partners and to get into that vulnerable space with each other, not just me to be vulnerable, but to be able to stand you being vulnerable with me, is because we are afraid that we will not be able to reply, to be able to hold space. And so we shut each other down from becoming vulnerable, not just ourselves.
Exactly. That's right. And even what you just said, create a space, that can be threatening to us because we don't know what's going to be in that space. So another thing I talk about in the book is if a parent brings a small child to a sandbox and they tell their child, now be careful, don't get sand in your eye and don't throw sand. And the child learns, okay, this is a scary place. I'll go very tentatively. If the parent puts the child in the sandbox and either sits in it and plays with the sand or says, honey, it's all yours, do whatever you want. Now the child learns, I get to follow my curiosity wherever it leads. It leads to that pail and, then the bird is flying overhead and isn't that amazing? And they learn, I can follow my curiosity moment to moment and it's wonderful. As opposed to the first child who's taught, be careful, be tight. And that's what I want to do about listening. We're in a playground. I don't know what you're going to do in the playground, but I'm intrigued by it. And then when you do that thing with the sand, I thought, I would like to do that too, actually. I'm learning the same thing.
Of course, I'm thinking of the parent who is, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. The parent who's going to say, but isn't it my job to protect my child? If sand goes into their eye, then they're not going to be able to play anymore. And so I'm just giving them a little bit of a warning so that I can help them then explore, but with a little bit of, caution. What do you have to say to that?
My guess is it's all about how it's delivered. If it's the first thing that's said, watch out for sand, because if it gets in your eye, it's really bad. Fear. You're putting fear into the child. If you sit in the sandbox and while you're playing, you say, by the way, see how tiny these are? You don't want to get them in your eye. It's a completely different message. Can I tell you a story? Not a sandbox story.
Yeah.
I came home from work one evening and I guess he was 12 years old, maybe 11 years old son was at the dining room table and he had taken apart a toaster oven. There were pieces all in front of me. It literally taken the thing apart. My first thought was, what the hell have you done? And as I was just thinking, what the hell have you done? He looked at me with these innocent eyes of, Papa, look what I did. So I could put my, what the hell did you do, Jesse, over to the side and go, yeah, sweetie, tell me, what did you do? And I sat down at the table and he said, well, all these things are connected. Did you know that, Papa? And he was just so excited and enthusiastic about what he had just discovered that I grokked in that moment. If I had gone with, Jesse, what the hell have you done? I would have shut him down on a number of levels. Don't let Papa see this curiosity. If I'm going to do something like this, put it back together before he gets home. Like, I would have created a distance. When I looked into his eyes, and like I said, that curiosity and innocence and love for what he was doing, I thought, no, this is a moment. This is a papa-son moment. So I just sat and had him teach me with all of his childlike enthusiasm how this is connected to that and this goes over there. And then after all that, when we had this great connection, I could say, so Jesse, can you put it back together? Of course, Papa. And bloop, he put it back together. I still don't know how he did it, but he's 43 now, and we still make jokes about that moment because it was a moment that we had that was beautiful. And it could have easily gone another way that would have just put a filter right in his brain.
Right. Something that I talk about a lot in my podcast is guilt and shame that we carry as parents. And especially in this generation, we try to read and to be prepared and to not be like our parents and do the best that we can. And we carry so much burden and pressure to be the perfect parents, even if we think that we're not carrying it. We're trying to be good enough, but what we're really trying to do is to follow a manual that doesn't exist. And so I would like for you to help the parent who just listened to what you said, felt the awe and the beauty of what you just described, because it was such a beautiful moment, to help those of us who may have reacted in the first way that you described to say, oh my God, what the hell did you just do? And now feel like we have ruined our child, that we have ruined our relationship, that we have created distance. Is this irreparable? Is there something that we can do in order to fix this? How can we get back after damage has been done? And this is with the children, but I'm also going to then connect it back to couples as well, because a lot of times the damage, in quotes, because I don't think that there's anything that needs fixing. Everything just tells us something. It's a message. But if we have gone the way that wasn't necessarily ideal for our connection with our child or with our partner, what can we do then instead of fall into guilt and shame and feel like helpless?
I love the questions you ask. They get right to it. So thank you. I think the key is if I did have the misstep of, Jesse, what the hell did you do? Now everything's contingent on me watching what he does with that. So you talk about guilt and shame. If I lead with that, he'll have some kind of shame reaction or guilt, but likely shame because it's from Papa. And so I want to stay attuned to that. I don't want to shame him. So that's the first step, is to really, again, anchor in my mind, what is my intention here with my boy? What do I really want? If I blow that and I go, what the hell did you do? Sorry, Papa, sorry. Put it back together and go to bed. Or My hope is that the ongoing self-reflection, I'll think, wait a minute. I was right. I have a right to be angry about what he did. He should have asked me first. And I'm still wrong because of the way I brought it. So then, as quickly as I can become conscious of it, I want to go right back to Jess and go, you know what, sweetie? I really don't want you to take apart toaster ovens without asking me first. But the way I approached you, that was all wrong. That's all on me. My anger wasn't necessary there, and I'm so sorry. And when I've done that with my kids, even as they were growing up, the almost surprise on their face that, oh, Papa doesn't need to be perfect. Like you had mentioned a moment ago, we want to follow the manual, be perfect. He's not perfect. He's just like me. We make mistakes. And now there's a connection between father and son that otherwise would have been missed. I'm doing the best I can. I mess up. You're doing the best you can. Sometimes you mess up. Let's just shake on the fact that we mess up sometimes. We don't have to be so tight about it. And then we can move on and talk about what one should or shouldn't do with the toaster oven.
Right. And so what you're talking about is what we hear as repair.
Yes.
And being able to go back and say, hey, I'm human, basically. And this is going to happen to you, to me, to everyone. And to be able to say sorry.
Yes. And just like my client that you brought up a moment ago, if I just make repairs by going, look, Jesse, I overreact a little bit. I'm sorry. He's not going to open up. If I drop into peanut, Jesse, I'm really sorry. I mistook. Then he's going to open up. He's going to feel my imperfection. But if I apologize with a defense, I'm a little up and back. He, like my client, would pick that up and equally take a step back. So for a parent to allow themselves to be vulnerable enough to say, oops, my bad, I think that's magic for a child.
And for a partner too, because we have been led to believe that parents are the experts and that we're supposed to be strong. And so it's very difficult to do that with our children. But also, I find when I see couples, we don't feel very comfortable to do that with our partners either. We feel like we need to be very strong as well. We don't feel okay with being vulnerable. What will help us in this process of being vulnerable? Because as you said before, I remember at some point after about 5-10 years of being in this space, having this random thought in my mind and saying, hey, they're some of my clients. I would never hang out with them in real life. If I met this person, I would immediately know, even though I'm the type of person that I hang out with very, very different people. But there are some that I know we wouldn't vibe. I wouldn't go out for coffee with this person. How do I love each and every one of them, even the ones that I know I wouldn't hang out with? And as I was processing this question, the only rational answer, the only answer that felt right was that I get the privilege of seeing them vulnerable.
Yes.
And when I see them in that state and when they open up in that way, there's no way I cannot love them. But I sense that with our own partner, when we have grievances and we have resentment, we are not allowing each other to be vulnerable. So we are not allowing ourselves to have that kind of love that comes with the vulnerability.
That's right. Exactly that. And it's heartbreaking. Even at my ripe old age, it's heartbreaking that this is the state we've created with each other. And I feel like I had an advantage. I don't know if I was born with it, but what I was saying earlier about sitting with my big Italian family, listening how nobody was listening. And I could feel it hurt. I felt alone. I didn't like it. I didn't like how that felt. So that gave me a leg up in terms of, even with my lady now, I know that she and I are both therapists. We can be very sharp to tell you what's going on inside of you. And even if I'm right about what's going on with her, if I'm not saying it from a place of dropped into my heart, knowing that right underneath what she's saying, there's this probably vulnerability, I've already predicted that we're not going to have a loving, deep contact. So I stay in touch with the suffering that I feel when listening is not happening, how alone I have felt really all my life, frequently when I'm speaking with people, listening to people, and how different it is when I'm speaking with a dear friend who does listen, who genuinely wants to know what's going on deeply inside of me. That's home. That's if I have a spiritual quest with other humans, that's it. To have that kind of listening in the raw contact. Because that's foremost in my mind, I'll get less and less triggered because my partner, my child, my client, therapist I'm consulting with, I'll get less triggered by, seduced by whatever I'm reacting to. I can just go, oh, there's that reaction. Hello. Now, what were you saying? And to me, that's the magic of it, is I'm committed to it because I know when we get to that vulnerability, as you say, we're not going to feel separate anymore, regardless of how you started the conversation. We're going to have a contact. So I've had what you've experienced in therapy. A client will come in, a new client, and I'll think, he's a raging narcissist. I don't want to be around men like that. Okay, I hear that response. That makes sense. Let's ask a few questions. And then the narcissism was just a filter protecting himself from real contact because he had no faith real contact was going to happen. And then after a few weeks, I'm intrigued by this person. I'm intrigued by how they develop filter after filter to protect themselves from their parents who were doing X or Y. And now we're together traveling this forest road.
These filters are there to protect us. And they come up and they're hard to unmask and take off because they are also there in order to make sure that we are safe. So the work that I need to do first is to feel safe. Or will it be enough, like you're saying, in the front of my mind to try to make it as conscious as possible that what I want to do is to listen at a deeper level at your potential suffering when it is that you come to me and you tell me something that feels like an attack?
Yes. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but can I ask you a question?
Of course.
How do you work that with your husband? When you feel an initial reactivity, how do you identify the lens, to use your language, and soften?
Okay. What comes up is, how do you have a right to say that when you've done this, as an example? And then your question was, how do I soften that?
How do you catch it like you just did and then not let it run the show? It's just, oh yeah, I see that reaction. And then how do you come back home to curiosity?
Well, I think I also have a leg up because it's the work that I do, right? So I will notice it in my body, like you said before. I will notice the tensing up. I will catch that what I'm about to say sounds aggressive. And I'll wonder, why am I feeling so aggressive? What button did he push?
Good.
So I'll turn to me and I'll wonder, what is it that got triggered, so that I can be able to calm down a little bit and then relate to him.
Yes.
Because my initial reaction was me defending me. It had nothing to do with him.
You become aware of, oh, I'm protecting myself. That's the job of the filter. So that's great. So there's the filter protecting you. Then there's you going, oh yeah, I see the protection. I don't think I need that right now. Thank you. And then you could just be all that you've learned about being a partner, a therapist, which is, I land in curiosity. I want to know what he's trying to say underneath that, maybe a little bit of harshness he brought with it. Right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But it's very difficult to separate that harshness and not take it personally.
And also, that's filled with filters. When my partner gets angry at me, I have no reaction. I was raised in a New York Italian family. I know anger. It's just anger. So she can get really angry, and I'm just, oh, what happened? But she wasn't raised with that anger. So if I have a little bit of anger, she may go, what are you doing? And I think, right. 2 different family systems, 2 different filters.
So how can I make it easier for myself to take things less personally? I think this is one of the most common questions that I get asked as a therapist.
Again, for me, Freud's concept of transference was mind-blowing. I'll keep in my mind 95% of what's coming toward me is transferential. 5% might be about me. But first, let me really hear what they're trying to get to, because I know the first blush will be a little disorienting. Wait, what? I don't want to bite onto that. I want to see what's deeper. Again, to use your earlier term, you said being vigilant. I want that silence, that stillness that lives in me, to be quietly watching, feeling my body, watching my thoughts, and not think that's self. It's just a reaction, most likely a protective reaction. And when I can be vigilant with that, just softly keeping it in mind, it's like you're saying, it's quite easy to not get reactive. It's like I can imagine you with your partner saying, he'll approach me oftentimes with that tone. That tone's not my best friend, but I know he's trying to get into something deeper. That's what I want to get to. That's where connection is.
And now I thought of something else. There are several traps out there now that there's so much talk about self-development and people get into psychology as much as possible. We start to name things and we start to spin them. So when you were saying it's transference, it's not about me. Maybe 95% is not about me, 5% is me. Now I heard the other type of response that I may get, which is, well, it's her problem, it's his problem. It's 95% his problem or her problem. Go solve it. Why are you throwing it onto me? So that also, on the one hand, it will help me not take things personally, but it won't help me connect with you because I'll just throw it back in your face and I'll tell you, you deal with it. How do we try to maintain a balance and not fall on the other end of the spectrum?
Again, really great question. I think it's as simple as I know I'm closer to what's a true self than a false self. Of all the distractions, all the filters. If I can hold that so much of what we do is projection, is transferential, in a desperation for a different kind of contact with you, contemporarily speaking. So even if I'm wrong, and it's actually 85% me, because I just did a stupid thing, like I could have done with Jesse about the toaster oven. If I'm being, again, to use your term, vigilant about what am I doing about contact, a whole wealth of other responses are now opening up in me. I'm not stuck in my own filter, my own, you did it wrong, you should ... Even if I know you're doing it wrong, I don't have to bite on that fishhook. I can have faith because I know you. And what I think about, like even with my partner and I, in the beginning, it was bouncy because we were wired so differently. But what I love about her is I trust down to my bones. She wants to really get to know me. I can feel the genuine intention to feel me, get me all the way down to the bone, even before these filters, these defensive structures had to get erected. And to me, that's innocence, which is a chapter I don't think you got to in the book yet. Because to me, if I can hold my child, my client, my partner, my own innocence, then I don't need to be reactive. Even when I'm doing it wrong, I don't need to be defensive about it and go, right, I wasn't moving out of innocence in that moment. I was reactive. Let's pause. My bad. And then it gives us a chance to drop back down into each other's mutual innocence. So how to keep that in mind? Like when I saw Jesse with the toaster oven, his innocence was in full display. He was so enthralled with this thing that he was discovering. He was an explorer into a new territory. And again, I had the power to shut that down. I could have hurt him there, and I would have felt dreadful about it. And I can't tell you how many times I've done something like that, and the next day or the next moment I'll say, my bad, hold on, wait, I'm lost right now. I forget what I just said. Tell me again about the toaster oven, or whatever it is. But it's a psycho-spiritual commitment. I don't want to feel alone anymore. And the best way to do that, really do whatever it takes so that they feel safe enough to speak their mind, that I feel safe enough to speak my mind, because we genuinely want to hear each other. As opposed to, I'm right, you did that thing, you were wrong, and you should do your own work. Which, if I may go on a moment longer, this is a real problem I have with psychology today, because it's taught it's all an inside job. We shouldn't be dependent on other. We should do our work, yes, which has truth to it. But I'm a big fan of interdependence. I need my partner to quiet herself, to really listen when I'm upset or scared or whatever. I need her. And growing up as an Italian man, no, you don't. You don't want to be dependent on anybody. That's a setup. That filter was planted into me. So to progressively work with her on, actually, I need you to hear me. I can't do this all myself. I need someone to reflect back to me, I can feel your love here, so I can now navigate that filter. I don't have to be scared. I'm dependent on you. And I think psychology has made a huge mistake by making dependence a bad word and independence, and we do our own work with the goal. I think they have to happen in unison.
Thank you so much for saying that. I love the fact that you mentioned this. I fully agree that we take things out of context, we take them to an extreme, and they haven't been helping. There are many things. The same thing about not being egotistical, that at some point just becomes having no boundaries. Or the opposite, work on your boundaries, which is the message. And then what happens is people just keep on pushing others away, trying to become super independent, becoming arrogant about it. So there's a lot of truth in what you said.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think that arrogance is very seductive for therapists. I have a PhD. I know what's going on here. Or parents. I'm the parent. I know what's right for you. And it's one of those funny things is even if I'm right about what's right for you, I'm wrong, thinking that I know what's right for you. I might be onto something, but as soon as I go to, I'm the expert, I know, I'm shut down to some degree, and the speaker's going to get it on some level. So how to be the expert in humility to get, I know one thing about this and there's 16 things I don't know yet.
Yeah, that's a hard lesson to learn.
I'm learning it every day.
There's so many things that I want to ask you. The one that's coming up more strongly right now, because you mentioned innocence, and something stirred in me in that moment. I thought when couples start out, usually there is that curiosity and there is that innocence. And I wonder, where could we have lost that? At some point, we no longer want to be curious. We no longer want to hear about each other's past, about the roots, about what could be leading you to think this way and react this way. A lot of couples start out this way, but then something happens and it gets lost. What could that be?
Historically, I think we parents are guilty of shutting down our children's innocence. And they learn very quickly, don't be innocent. Get a filter up to protect me. And then we repeat that 1,000 times with our children, and they become concretized. And then they get confused as self. So then if we speak contemporarily, how to keep in mind what I want most of all with my partners to feel her innocence. And in my bias, innocence is the place we know exactly what we want and exactly what we don't want. And my example is you put a, 10-month-old baby in a chair and give them steamed broccoli. And they touch it, and right away they're, no, I don't want that. 2 seconds later, you give them chocolate ice cream, and they're wearing it in a moment. Yes, this is what I want. There's no inhibition. There's no restriction. If they're hungry and they're not being fed, they just start to scream. They haven't been inhibited by those filters yet. I remind myself that the most important thing in terms of my partnership with Davida is I want to feel her innocence. I want to know what she really wants. I don't want her to have to filter what she wants in life. I want to feel it and then join with it because it's probably going to be fun. So as a therapist, as a parent, as a partner, I keep in mind real intimacy, real connection happens when the other person feels that they can drop into their innocence, i.e., knowing what's right for them in the moment, what works for them. And they're feeling safe enough to feel it and then express it. And when they do that, and I can feel it comes from innocence, the core of who they are, I melt. I just will melt.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I wonder, though, if I really listen to you and you really love travel, but I'm scared of planes, or even if I'm not scared of planes, I don't like traveling. I'm a couch potato and I love it. I like being home. I like the coziness. And now we've both listened to each other's true needs and wants, and we find that we're very incompatible in this. What happens then?
We break up and find better partners. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I would be curious if I were either of those partners. If I was the partner who's afraid to travel or like couch potato, I'd want to look at their excitement and enthusiasm about travel and start to wonder, wait, do I really want to be a couch potato? Am I happy as a couch potato?
Or is it just fear?
Or is it just fear? Is it a filter that I think is self? And depending how the other person travels, I'd also wonder, do you really travel because you love the excitement, the curiosity of travel? Or is there something else going on that you don't like to be at home and quiet?
Escapism.
So either could be somewhat protective, or they could be just who they are. Luckily for me, I'm with a partner who loves to travel, so we travel a great deal.
Awesome. I could be talking with you for hours, but I would love for you before you go to give us something for couples who are listening, for parents who are listening to take with them. So if they were just to keep one thing from this whole conversation, one message from you, one takeaway, what could that be?
I'm not sure you're going to like my answer. When I first wrote the book, the first line in the book was, let's face it, we're dreadful at listening. That's how I wanted to start the book. All of my friends said, you can't start negatively like that. I thought, okay. So I changed that. But to your listeners, I would keep that in mind. Just the recognition, we don't listen very well. There was a debate club in school. We're taught how to speak our mind. We're not taught how to listen. We're just not. So to keep in mind, the problem might not be, I'm not speaking my truth. The problem might be, I don't listen to what's true right here. So let me put a little emphasis on that because we're programmed not to listen. I don't know if you know who Schopenhauer was, a philosopher of many, many years ago. He said the end of our suffering isn't with joy and happiness. It's by really dropping into the suffering, feeling another person's suffering, and then we're one in the suffering. There's no distance. So to me, that's the answer on many, many levels.
I love it.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Could you please tell everyone where they could find you? I'm going to have all the links and your bio and everything in my show notes, but I would love for you to tell us how people can get in touch with you, where they can find your book.
Yeah, the book is the easiest. It's, Listening in the Raw, and it's on Amazon. So you could buy the book, or you could buy the audio version, which is read by my son, who's the Earl of Dad Jokes. He tells dad jokes all the time. And if you want to contact me, you just Google me, and my name comes right up, and we can have a chat.
Perfect.
But if they're looking for a therapist, they may want to call you because you're good.
Oh, that is so sweet. Thank you. You're not retired. They could call you.
They can.
Yay. It was so great to meet you and to have this conversation with you.
It was lovely to speak with you. I loved this contact. Let's keep it
I
going.
feel the same. Yes. Bye.
Bye.